All right, welcome to the Two Sons Podcast. 2 days in a row. Happy Tuesday, everybody.
Dude,
as it turned out with our schedule hitting Fallout yesterday, we're hitting Shogun season finale as well as episode 9 in this one. I'm not gonna lie, man, did not end the way I expected it. Again, I didn't read the book or see the earlier version of the show. As you and I said, we were gonna approach this as complete underexposed Shogun fans. And honestly, man, like I kind of appreciated that it was different.
I did too. Yeah. I was actually okay with the ending. When I was waiting on you as you're finishing up the show, I was actually looking into it a little bit.
Okay, that's good.
And apparently, like Forbes and Vanity Fair can't really say that there's going to be a season 2. There's a very good chance that there's not going to be a season 2. And apparently that's kind of how the book ends, and apparently that's how the show is intended to end, regardless of how successful it was.
Yeah, I thought that the Yabushigi suicide scene in his conversation on the ledge by himself with Toranaga was a really cool way to kind of show what happens next. And it makes sense because Toranaga's like super secretive all the time, and then it's like here's a guy on his deathbed that he can like confide in him about. It made sense in the scope of Lady Mariko's move to Osaka and everything she did while she was there. And honestly, what I thought was super fascinating was there is no war. There's no war. He basically says we're going to meet on this battlefield. The heir's army is not going to show up, and then the other regents are going to turn on Ishido, and then everything's going to be fine. Toranaga is going to start a new kind of like base of operations out of Edo, and I'm actually not entirely. I overheard this during the. I shouldn't say overheard. I learned this when I toured the Imperial Palace when I was in Tokyo this summer, and apparently, from what I understand, it used to be that the Japanese Emperor Taiko stayed in Osaka, and then there was a point in history where they moved to Tokyo, which is Edo is Tokyo.
Oh, okay.
So, but I'm not actually sure if this is the time that that's referring to, or if that's a separate point in history. But I did think that was interesting because, like, that's kind of what Toranaga was saying is like, I'm going to be the new boss operating out of Edo.
Yeah.
But like, it was just like between the sacrifice of Mariko. Like, man, like there's so much like visceral emotion in that season finale you feel from Blackthorn. By the way, I want to shout out, I should pull up his name and I'll do that while we're talking this through. But the actor who played John Blackthorn, I thought did such a good job.
Yeah, I figured we'd talk about the casting for this show at least one point during today's episode, just because it was so good. Like they did such a fabulous job casting every single character in the show.
Cosmo Jarvis.
Cosmo.
Shout out Cosmo.
Cosmo
Kramer Jarvis.
No, they did a fabulous job with every single cast member, I thought.
Yeah. No, I thought Mariko did an amazing job. And like the central focal point of the show seemed to center around the Anji and Mariko and their relationship. And I thought it was super interesting. I want to bring it back to episode 9 for a second.
Okay.
We talked about the seppuku scene in episode 8 with Toranaga's number 2. I'm blanking on his name at this point, but like that scene in that kind of meeting that they had, and that really was an incredible scene.
Hiramatsu,
that's right. Mariko getting ready to commit seppuku and the Anjin stepping up to be her second.
Oh.
That was
I know.
Like gut-wrenching, man. That was a gut-wrenching scene. And like that I thought was the scene of the season. That one stole it for me.
You think so?
Yeah, because you didn't see episode 9 and I saw it before you did. And like I was so, because like they titled the episode Crimson Sky. So like you're under the impression, like honestly when Yabushigi did that thing on the wall, at first I thought like, oh, Yabushigi's helping Toranaga like mount the castle walls to just fuck shit up. But that's not what it was. And it turns out like the climax of the show is Mariko's sacrifice.
Yeah. Her loss was so powerful because they did such a good job developing her character and making her so likable and making her so important. And Lord Toranaga's ability to foresee the future and to manipulate the future, not in an evil way, but just in a very smart way, is unparalleled. He was such an interesting character, and the two of them together just understood the assignment together. And Lady Mariko's life ended up meaning so much. And it was really interesting to see her balance the difference between like her Japanese culture and then her Catholic culture. And somehow she still made it work. And I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. We go back a few episodes. You and I had a debate about whether or not the conversation that Mariko and Toranaga had about Lady Ochiba was going to have anything to do with the ultimate plot.
Yeah.
And with that scene where they kind of showed Lady Ochiba despising Lord Toranaga, that led both of us astray into thinking that was not the route that they were going to go. We had this idea of like the Anjin and Yabushigi like getting, basically diverted to blockading the bay and like some sort of other ally relationship being made and them invading Osaka. We had all these different ideas, and it turns out the entire thing was basically a ploy to sway Lady Ochiba and then effectively the heir's army. Yeah. And there was some emphasis on the banner of the heir. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was interesting, because Toranaga referred to his banner at one point. Yeah. And then he talked about Ishido not having a banner. Yeah. And so the way I interpreted that was like essentially the heir has a claim to the throne. Yeah. And that I think kind of represents his banner, right? Correct. Ishido does not have a claim, but there was that I think that Toranaga viewed himself as like essentially the person that has to step in and be in charge as Shogun until the heir comes of age, and he viewed that as like his banner, so to speak. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then they also talked about the legality. So just because the heir was for or against something, then essentially made it legal or illegal. Yeah, exactly. Which I thought was super cool. Lady Ochiba too. They really strayed us the wrong way intentionally in the beginning of the season too, just because she comes off as like kind of evil and creepy.
Oh, she totally comes off as evil and creepy.
I wonder if the directors... Yeah, I know. Though, that's what I was going to bring up. It's like, I wonder if the director's like, hey, I want you to turn up the crazy eyes to level 10. And then slowly we'll just turn it down as the season progresses.
We'll have you writing poems by the end.
As she was getting casted, it was like, okay, like, you're doing great. We just need to see your craziest crazy eyes. Yeah. Oh, those are crazy. All right, you got it. Now turn them down. All right, you got the gig.
It's funny because in retrospect, Luke and I had a lot of conversations surrounding what exactly Lady Ochiba's power was. Mm-hmm. Like, why is it that anybody was really worried about what she had going on? Right. And now it becomes abundantly clear it's because as the heir's mother and as the person who effectively kind of can manipulate the sensibilities of the heir, she's effectively the person in charge of the largest army in the realm.
Isn't that the truth too? Because they Lady Ochiba and Lady Mariko had that meeting, right? And it was all under the guise of the heir wanting to talk to the Anjin, even though the heir was literally playing with rocks the entire time. And so that's a perfect way to say it. I mean, essentially, Lady Ochiba is in control just because the heir. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because that was the conversation where Mariko's talking with her, and the heir is with the Anjin. So you actually think that was manipulated as part of the process?
Yes. I think that was like
Toranaga might have.
No, I think that was Lady Ochiba just wanting to talk to Lady.
Oh yeah,
Mariko.
because she actually said, "quote unquote," the heir wants to see the Anjin, and they use that as an excuse for those two to actually talk and hang.
Exactly, and essentially, Lord Toranaga knew that they'd have to go down memory lane. Like Lady Mariko and Lady Ochiba, they'd have to go down memory lane if they were, in that type of setting with each other. Mm-hmm. And then it's just so clear that everyone just wants power, and then Lady Ochiba is kind of realizing that, and that's essentially the turn of the entire plot, is that she realizes that her country is being run by bad men, essentially.
Well, and if you come back to like what actually caused her to turn on Toranaga to begin with, it was because she looked at this situation, or by the way, the Taiko that she was the Taiko that she served before she served the second Taiko that she birthed the heir to. That first Taiko, he was a bad man, as we know. Right. And I think with the way that whole situation got kind of like colored to her as she just kind of rolls back up in the house, they're like, hey, by the way, the Taiko's dead, you better leave this city and never come back, right? So like, it's obvious, it's easy to see how she kind of looked at Toranaga as a antagonist there. Mm-hmm. And I think the genius in the move with Lady Mariko is it effectively forced Lady Ochiba to evaluate the situation for what it was, which was a problem. And like honestly, like it was coming apart at the seams there for Ishido towards the end anyways. Like it seemed to me like both Christian regents were out on it. They had to kill that old samurai guy. The other two dudes that he had on the council were both guys that he basically bribed to get into the position.
You're exactly right.
For their loyalty. So it's like Ishido, and that kind of fundamentally comes back to what separated Toranaga from Ishido and why Toranaga eventually ends up winning, as the show strongly hints. Ishido did not inspire loyalty through his actions.
Correct.
He inspired loyalty through manipulating the situation.
That's a beautiful way to say
Toranaga inspired loyalty through his actions, and it won people over. I thought like even like centering around his manipulations of Buntaro and his manipulations of Mariko and his manipulations of the Anjin, they weren't manipulations in a nefarious kind of way. They were basically just like testing their character. You know what I mean?
What do you make of the Anjin's character now and his importance as time progresses in this world?
That was really interesting to me because like Toranaga has this moment when he's on the ledge where he's basically like, I don't actually need the Anjin.
I just keep him around because he's funny.
He's just kind of funny, you know? And like, and honestly, like, I did kind of get that vibe from Toranaga where like, I did think he saw some value in the cannon, no doubt.
True.
Although in theory, the cannon would have been damaged when the ship sunk, or who knows, maybe they're able
but
to.
I think they had their own cannon too that were not even English.
Like because of their artillery, kind of like a brigade or whatever. Yeah, and so honestly, like the way I looked at it too is I think the Anjin kind of I think Toranaga viewed the Anjin essentially as like a representation of like the kind of like a representation of everything the Catholic Church wasn't in that situation. In the sense that like I think Toranaga was suspicious about the motivations of the Catholic Church in Japan. Where at least not necessarily with specific people like Father Martin, but rather with like just like some of the commerce
the
stuff
Portuguese
that they were manipulating.
The Portuguese. Talking about how the Portuguese were essentially using the church as a weapon.
Yeah, and that's honestly a better way to put it. Is like I feel like Toranaga had his suspicions about the Portuguese.
Yeah,
and I think the Anjin basically represented his kind of like lens into a different perspective of the outside world. Agreed. And I think he saw value there.
If you were Blackthorn, would you stick around or would you leave?
So, are we to interpret that kind of weird flashback scene as him having left eventually?
Dude, that's a great question.
He also had the cross in his hand. Was that Mariko's cross? Was it?
Dude, it was. I totally forgot. About that.
Did we go? I need to go back and look though because they showed that cross at the beginning, and then at the end of it, like you see it at the end when he throws it in the water. But like theoretically, it could just be another cross.
It could be, but I mean, it was very similar. It was a black cross.
It was very similar.
With like black beads. I mean, it looked like the cross to me. And that kind of exited my mind because I was like, oh, he's not going to toss it in the water. And then Fuji helps him do it, right?
Fuji literally tells him, let your hands be the last to touch it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that was just like a weird, like, dream that he had or something. I literally don't know. Because like then there was like those two little kids that were in his room, presumably his
children
or
grandchildren
or grandchildren. Yeah, probably his grandchildren.
I mean, he's not going to actually have kids till for a while. Like,
what do you mean? Oh, like he's not going to meet anybody.
In theory, he goes home and has those kids.
True,
but I don't know.
And the way that they're talking about, it was like, was it true that he got this samurai sword from
a bunch of savages or
something like that, something derogatory?
And I have expected it to go back to the Anjin so that he could basically chastise those kids and be like, hey, listen, these were not savages. And because like honestly, like I thought, you remember that scene right before he goes to visit Toranaga where he goes out to his little rock garden and he sits. I thought that was a really cool. It's so funny because it's such a random scene because like he tells Fuji like set up the meeting, right? And then after that scene, he has that cool moment with Nagakado where basically he says, he basically like they kind of have like a weird moment where it's kind of like a mutual respect when he hands him the gun and the swords. Because remember, those are the two guys at the first scene where it was like, you fuck you, you fucking suck. And then the other guys in Japanese like, no, fuck you fucking savage.
They're talking about like peeing on each other.
Like they were.
I forgot about that.
When he's in the pit and they're both like just talking shit, calling each other savages. So funny. Like it was so funny. So I thought that was cool. But the moment that he kind of has by himself in the rock garden, I thought was just basically a strong indicator that like, I'll even go beyond respect. I think that John Blackthorne had gained like a love of Japanese culture.
Oh, I completely agree. That was one of my favorite parts of the show. Actually, was seeing the Unjin just fall in love with Japan. Like, and it'd be hard not to. I mean, when you think about where he came from and the big city that he was in, right, and how dirty it was and grimy it was, and how men were disgusting and filthy, and then how much contrast that is with like the Japanese and their culture, and like how clean everything is, and how like everything is almost special, and how everything has a purpose, right? Like it's not even like minimalist, it's essentialist, like, right? So it's not that they don't have, you know, a pot or a pan, it's that they have one pot and pan because it serves one purpose. And like I just love that. And it'd be hard not to fall in love with that.
Oh, absolutely. I will say personally, like obviously I was only in Japan for a week and I got a very touristy version of Japan. But for starters, the place is just beautiful. Yeah. It's remarkably beautiful. The phrase I would use, so like for instance, just like the sweeping of the porches. I remember when I was in Kyoto and I was walking around in the town there, everybody, even so, like I think a lot of what we saw is, you know, traditional Japanese housing from that time. And you can actually, from what I understand, stay in places like that when you go visit Japan. But even just like regular storefronts, just every single person there takes such pride in their possessions and in their in everything that makes them who they are. And like it's honestly like to see that too, where like I'd be walking by a shop and there were the shop would be clean, but the guy's out front sweeping his stuff and wiping his stuff off. And like, it just honestly, it just is a remarkable place. And like, honestly, like I'll like, I did so much traveling this summer. I traveled 5 weekends in a row. I went to Japan literally a day after you and I and our friends spent 5 days in California. And I had just come back from Summer League and I in Montana and Texas for a wedding. And it was like bang, 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 bang. And like this show really helped me kind of like take a minute to just appreciate that, how fortunate I was to get to go visit and get to see some of the things that I saw and like, and just honestly, like I thought that was really cool because, like, you know, Blackthorne shows up at the beginning and he's like, I hate this place. I don't want to be here. Like, I want to get my men and I want to go kill the Portuguese and then I want to get the hell out of here. You know, like that sort of thing. And like you could just tell by the end, it's like he had. Even Toranaga says, like, I think his destiny is to never leave Japan, which I still think he probably ends up doing so. At least
it's hard to say, man. The fact that he's holding the cross in his hand might make it like a parallel universe type vibe where like he is just thinking about that, you know, because again, the cross was gone. And Toranaga does say that, you know, Blackthorne belongs here. And Blackthorne fell in love with the culture, right? To the point where when he did meet up with his crew, he kicked one of their asses and walked away. Like that's literally, I mean, shockingly, that's how he reacted when he finally got to his crew. He was there for a minute and a half.
Yeah, he's like, actually, these guys suck.
Dude, but to what you're talking about, like, I would love to go to Japan. And if you ever wanted to go, I would 100% be down to go with you. I'd probably do a little detour and hit up some, like, Japanese wood shop.
Oh, dude, yeah. Can you imagine?
Oh, my gosh. Probably half of the accounts that I follow on Instagram are Japanese woodworkers.
Well, and they probably use a very different kind of wood than we use here in the US,
you know, I'm sure there's some similarities and some differences, right? Like a lot of wood is transported globally. So like you can get wood from Africa and other places like that. But it would just be really cool to see how they go about things.
And it comes back to what we talked about with pride in work. Like there's actually, my brother told me about this. I need to check it out. But apparently there's a documentary on YouTube on the making of the samurai swords. And like there's apparently there's like a status level you can reach as a sword maker, and it's like a very, very sacred thing, and there's only a handful of them.
That's so cool.
And they have to like, and if you get apprenticed to one, it's such a huge honor and that sort of thing. And like,
that is
again,
so cool.
I think it'd be really cool. I will say, I wish I would have gone in at a different time of year. We showed up in July, and it was like high 90s and 75% humidity every single day. And like, dude, I have some pictures in my phone of me like at temples in Kyoto, just like literally drenched in sweat. Like it was out of control. Like I want to go during the time of year that you see in Shogun, where it's like kind of rainy season and it's a little bit more gloomy. Like I did get to go into the mountains a little bit. There's a famous restaurant that I was very lucky to get to try. I wish I should have looked it up before I got on the show, but that was just in the farthest southwest portion of the Tokyo metro area, kind of tucked as you start to get into the mountain range. And from what I understand, it was some sort of famous old building that they actually picked up and moved and dropped there.
Wow.
But it's like tucked in this mountain crevice with like a creek kind of running through. And we ate in a very similar setup to what you see in the show, like kind of on the ground. And
cool.
And it was just like I got to see a little bit of some of the when it wasn't super hot and was more peaceful, but like for the most part, it was just a tough time of year. So like I want to go back, and the other thing too is like my wife and I went as part of a larger thing for her job. She got an incentive trip through a vendor that she works with. And so we did a very touristy version of it.
Yeah.
I want to actually like do it on a deeper level too. And like I also just kind of gained such a great appreciation for the pride the entire society takes in efficiency and cleanliness. And it's something that I think that we could do a hell of a lot better here in the United States.
Totally agree.
And just like it was cool. I thought the show kind of helped me to kind of go back in my own brain and kind of appreciate some of the things that I saw while I was there too.
What was your take on Buntaro helping the Unjin at the very end?
So I had a feeling that whatever happened when the Anjin stepped up to be her second, something about that incident made its way back to Toranaga.
Or you mean Buntaro?
Well, Toranaga and then
Oh,
Buntaro.
I see.
And I think Toranaga, because like remember Buntaro wanted to kill him,
right?
So I think like
the old Saki night.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that actually served the purpose that served was essentially to give a closure to that storyline, and in a weird way, like I appreciated that it was a little bit of a love story, but like not in some sort of cheesy kind of like let's capitalize on a love story kind of thing. It was more like I think both men kind of loved Mariko in a different way. You know, obviously, you know, one more respectfully than the other, but in a different way. And I think that the Anjin and Buntaro had more common ground than you'd think.
Right.
And I think that whole incident and that kind of like closure that we get at the end essentially is representative of them kind of finding that common ground and working together as they pull the ship out of the water.
That was just one of like the really wholesome aspects of the show, I thought. And that's one of the things that I was talking about maybe a couple episodes ago, where the show just did such a good job marrying different ideals, right? Like marrying like a wholesome feeling where like you get to see two men respect each other due to their works that they, you know, and due to their like witnessing of each other and how they carried themselves and you know, their knowledge of each other's past and things like that. But then there's also a lot of humor in this show as well. And then there's a ton of culture. And then, of course, there were some really violent aspects, but it was all in good taste, I thought. All in very good taste.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the cultural difference as well. Like there's a, you know, I know it sounds crazy to say, but I think I think part of what the show helped me understand is like even something as profound as death can be viewed very differently from culture to culture.
Yeah.
You know, and like even just take Christianity, for instance. Like Christianity has this huge focus on life after death, right? But whereas like the one of the big feelings I got out of this show is like death was very much viewed as part of life in terms of like your death and how it impacts everybody else that's alive. And essentially, if your death is in service of something,
right,
it's one of the greatest honors that you can have or achieve, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I thought that was super interesting.
Death giving life meaning somehow.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, and so I thought that was cool because, like, I think we would all probably assume death would be kind of like the same across the board, culture to culture, but it's not. And I thought that honestly, like, I don't know about you, but after the opening scene in the first episode, even just my whole view of seppuku is very different now than what it was after episode 1. Like, you gain an understanding. Like, dude, that was a crazy scene when, I thought it was super interesting. So, like, Mariko, when they lock themselves in that room, they start mounting explosives to the door. And then Mariko runs up to the door and says, Mariko, she says her family name, which I'm blanking on at this point, but she announces her name and says, I protest Ishido's, treatment of this situation, blah, 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 blows up, she dies, right? And literally, like, the Anjin does the exact same thing to Toranaga, like takes a sword, sticks it in his chest and goes like, John Blackthorn protests Toranaga's treatment of the village by my death. And he's like, and he actually like starts to stab himself and literally Toranaga runs in there and splits it, punches him in the face and knocks him over. And it's like, oh gosh. And like, I thought that was cool because like that, I think that in a lot of ways, like that was another version of Blackthorn kind of like embracing the culture because like he was willing to send that message. Like he didn't think it was right that the people in the village were suffering and he was willing to die for it.
Right.
Yeah.
What was your, or I'll start off with my take. Yabushigi. He was like the most likable a-hole character I've ever witnessed.
Oh yeah.
As a fan of a show. Like, the first time we meet him, he's boiling people in witch cauldrons just for sport.
Yeah.
And then after that, you're like, oh, is he that bad of a guy? And then he was just kind of ratty. And everyone just kind of accepted him for it. And like Toranaga's understanding of Yabushigi made him a likable character almost. Because Toranaga's like, yeah, he's a piece of shit, but we use him and he's serving a purpose. You know what I mean? But then he was somehow still like really respectful. So like he'd always get caught on his BS, and then he'd just be like, yeah, like I did,
Yeah, I thought that was one of the funnier parts of the series when he was like, can I have a cooler death? Like getting shot by a cannon or eaten by fish?
I know. And then as we were Jason and I before the show, we were laughing about Yabushigi's death poem and how just, the idea of a poem is to write something beautiful and his was just awful. It was about getting eaten by dogs.
But he kind of captures his kind of idea. There were so many funny things in that scene between like literally that one dude as he's walking away going like, have a good death. Yeah. And then like when he kind of name drops, I shouldn't say name drops, but like when Toranaga's talking about all the things that have kind of helped shape the way things have gone. And then literally Yabushi goes like, well, don't forget I'm the one who got the Anjin for you. Like, don't forget I helped. And Toranaga did actually say like you helped. Like when he listed the people that kind of helped him get to that point, he said that. And then the death poem, like the leave me for the dogs. That was really, really funny. It was. What I appreciated about this show, and I've always enjoyed this about the the media space, is the show is nothing like what I expected. It was nowhere near as action filled as I expected. It was very much more deep storytelling, relationship building, that sort of thing. Yeah, and they just did a really good job of it. And it made I texted Luke because I just watched the episode before we recorded here, and I texted Luke like about 10 minutes in. I was like, man, I've really enjoyed this show. Like it just sucked me in and gave me like a kind of we talk about this with Star Wars, but one of my favorite things about this kind of like, I don't even know what the word is for it, but it's like period pieces, fantasy, sci-fi. Mm-hmm. Those three kinds of things, they have a way of like pulling you out of the present and making you just kind of like feel like you're in a different place. Yeah. And I have always really appreciated that because of my job. Like, and I work so much with basketball between coaching and the show, and then also just training myself. Yeah. That like I get so sucked into basketball and I get so sucked into the stressful social calendar and all these different things. And then like, I watch a show like this, and it's like now I'm in Japan in 1600.
Yep.
Now I'm listening to a Thrawn book. Now I'm on board the Chimera or on board the Springhawk,
You're
or
exactly
something
right.
like that. I've always really appreciated that about fantasy, sci-fi, and these period pieces. Like they just kind of disconnect you from reality for a little bit,
Right.
And it's so weird because I feel like that's viewed as weird, and I don't know what it. And maybe we are weird. But I've just always enjoyed that.
No, that's literally one of the biggest reasons why we like Star Wars. To the point where a lot of our episodes, we talk about whether or not we feel like we were in the Star Wars universe or not, and how sometimes it'd be like really distracting when we'd get ripped out of the Star Wars universe due to something that's just completely ridiculous.
Lobs, laser fire,
ludicrous.
Or a coffin escape pod.
Oh my gosh, coming out of the Millennium Falcon of all places. No, you're exactly right. And we should rate shows on that, like whether or not we felt like we were in the show's universe. Or
this
not.
one was a 10 out of 10 for me.
Literally a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
There's not a single time when I was watching the show where I was thinking like, oh shit, like that was really distracting. I wish they wouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Even there was some discomfort that, I felt as a Catholic because of the way that Catholics were portrayed or not portrayed. And even the way that the church was portrayed.
I thought they did a pretty fair job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Like even on the parts that were not of a different universe, things that I deeply relate to, I still thought that they did a really good job with it. Yeah, especially in the final two episodes.
After episode 1, you and I were like, this could get ugly for the Catholics.
Yeah. I know. But the way that, because it's no secret that bad men have used the church as a weapon, right? Like there's no secret. I'll be the first person to say that. And it continues to be used as a weapon in a lot of ways, But the intimacy and the relationship that Lady Mariko and Father Martin had, I thought was really, really cool.
Is it a Catholic tradition to change someone's name when they convert? Is that a thing you've heard of before?
No, not really. I mean, like, so when you're baptized,
I'm like, Mariko's Mariko. Like that's her name.
So I know what you mean. So when you're baptized, you pick like a saint's name.
Oh.
Or when you're confirmed, I mean. I think I picked St. Luke fittingly, just because I was like, I don't know, St. Luke works. Yeah, keep it easy. No, but I think that was more or less of like a cultural name too. Like for example, names were almost changed when people were immigrating here to the United States, just because of like the palatability of saying a name.
Yeah.
So like it's like, oh, Mariko sounds like Mary, Mariko Mary, and I think that's probably where that came from.
Yeah, and Maria was basically just the Portuguese kind of translation of Mary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think that's what it was. But I'd like to know whether or not like some of our Japanese viewers felt like they were just in the way that they portrayed Japan and its culture. Obviously, this is a fictional story, and that's always the first thing to keep in mind. But I'm curious to see how people who live in Japan right now and who have that culture and heritage, I wonder how they feel about the show.
I thought that it was intended to basically provide a very historically accurate kind of approach to that. Like I mean, even Toranaga throughout the whole show is portrayed as obviously the protagonist, but at the same time like he was doing kind of shady shit the whole time. Like for instance, him basically like cutting off villagers' heads and putting their heads on spikes.
Yeah, that's not a good look.
Yeah, but like at the same time, they never made that seem like that was Toranaga being a dickhead. They made it seem like it was Toranaga doing what the lords of the time did.
Right.
And that's the thing is like I've always appreciated like when you tell a story, tell the good and the bad, tell the good, the bad, and the ugly.
True. 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 And someone at that level of power definitely had to do some bad, what seemingly bad, in order to stay in power, which again, like one of the reasons why I think Toranaga is so likable is just because he was in a powerful position for the right reason. And it was funny because Yabushige asked him like, oh, you want to be Shogun, essentially, and he's not like, no, I don't want to be Shogun. He's like, pretty much.
That
and
was
then he kills him.
It was kind of an interesting little final jab there.
It was
between the Shogun thing.
Because then it made you realize like, okay, is Lord Toranaga really that good? And I'd like to think he still is. I don't think that he was just trying to dominate and rule.
Well, what's not a believable character arc is the I don't want to lead, but fine, I'll do it.
I know,
like that,
exactly.
Which was kind of the card Toranaga was pulling with his public-facing kind of persona.
True.
That said, like I didn't view his ambition as ambition with the intent of like having his line take over. I viewed it as I think he genuinely viewed it. This is the thing. Like when you're It's no different than like when you're the best basketball player in the world, there's a certain assholeness I expect out of you.
Where you want to take the last shot.
You wouldn't get to that position if you weren't kind of arrogant, asshole, confident, right?
Yeah.
And so that's my thing is like, I do genuinely believe that he had every intention to hand over leadership to the heir when he came of age.
Yeah.
But I also thought he was like, I'm the right person for the job right now.
Yeah.
I am the one who should lead things until he comes of age.
There's a very odd but striking parallel between Thrawn and Toranaga.
That's actually really interesting.
That just kind of hit me as you were talking. So anybody who doesn't know who Thrawn is,
classic Jason and Luke.
Yeah, this is classic two sons right here. So anybody who doesn't know who Thrawn is, he's a Chiss alien from the Star Wars universe, and essentially he's just a mastermind when it comes to being able to, deal with situations, especially battles. And he ends up being in great power, not because he wants to be, but just because he's the perfect person to be.
He's the right man to do it.
And that's essentially Toranaga. Mm-hmm.
No, it's actually a really good comp. And but it also operates in the gray area as well.
He definitely operates in the gray area.
That was definitely a Thrawn thing. And yeah. But yeah, shout out to FX and the creators of Shogun. Shout out to Cosmo. Great job.
Great job, Cosmo. Everyone who was in that.
All the actors and actresses in the show. That's it for Shogun. We are going to, again, I'm going to be releasing the Tales of the Empire kind of like preview here in a couple of days. Dude, are we going to go see Phantom Menace in the theaters?
I think we should.
I think we should.
May 3rd.
How about all of our listeners who are Star Wars fans? Go see the Phantom Menace. We'll do a little throwback.
Do you think they're going to give us like a little sneak peek into something at the end of the movie?
I don't know. That's actually a good question.
They would.
But we got I have to take a look at the scope of things, but there's a bunch of stuff on the horizon. There's a bunch of good movies coming out this summer too.
We've got our Darth Revan Legends book
I
review.
really want to do Darth Revan next. So let's plan on doing that in about a week.
Cool.
Does that sound like a plan?
That sounds good.
All right, guys. We sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting the show. We will be back in a couple of days for Tales of the Empire and in about a week for Revan. We'll see you guys then.
Thanks a lot.